It's my first time actually taking a look at anything from Psycho Bunny. I think if you were to swap this out for Lacoste or you swap this out for Ralph Lauren, the product quality here can easily be sold at a much higher price point.
I'm Joe. I've been in manufacturing for over a decade, and I've overseen the production of millions of products all over the world. And on this show, we take apart pieces from your favorite brands, see if the quality is there, and I'll let you know if it's worth your hard-earned money. This is Industry Secrets.
All right, what do you got for me this week, Noah?
Check this out.
Hey, another community request, Psycho Bunny. So now going forward, one thing we're gonna start integrating at the end technical flats to show all the callouts for all the design elements of the products that we're reviewing. We're also gonna start giving products a score, so stay tuned to the end for that. But Psycho Bunny, this is something that I've seen pop up in recent years. I know it's quite big in the Latin community, right, Noah?
Definitely is.
And I think they got bought out by a Canadian company recently. This is 120 Canadian. I like the bag. I always like a very dark, deep blue. It always feels so regal. We got the Psycho Bunny sticker, tissue paper. Okay, let's see what we have here. Okay, a polo, very common polo fabric. This is called a piqué. So piqué is known for its breathability and stretch. It's like a sorbet, orange sorbet color. This is definitely a elongated silhouette. There's a high-low cut here with a gross grain tape on the sides, embroidered chest logo. There's flat knit ribbing for the collar and the sleeves. Made in Peru, 100% Pima cotton. I know a lot of Lacoste items are actually made in Peru as well. I'm not saying it is, but possibly in the same factory as Lacoste. But whenever you have a large brand making things in a specific country, you have to think about all the suppliers there that are going to be supplying a factory that produces products for Lacoste because they produce so much volume. Even if it's not made in the same factory, there's going to be adjacent factories that are going to have the same expertise to make a lot of polos and products like this. Always going to a region that really specializes in very particular items is going to be great because you're going to get better products at the end of the day because the manufacturer is going to be a lot more experienced. Plus, you're going to get things a lot quicker too because a lot of the existing supply chain is designed to support very specific items. Another prime example of this would be denim in Turkey. You can get really great denim in Turkey because there's a lot of existing suppliers that are supplying a lot of great brands out of that region. So that's one thing to just always keep in mind whenever you're designing a product. So what else do I have here? We have mother of pearl buttons. The back side of these are actually dyed to match the fabric. It's a very particular detail for a garment here. I can see there's a piping detail on the taping here too. That is the same gross grain as the tape here, which is a nice detail. It's my first time actually taking a look at anything from Psycho Bunny. I like the little molded plastic hanger here. The taping here also goes all the way around the neck to cover the seam, which is going to be a lot more comfortable around the neck. And I've also noticed here the taping detail also goes all the way to the end of the shoulder. Also, what they've done here is they've taken the fabric itself, they've sewn it together, then they folded it with the tape, and then they sewed it with one chain stitch here to close it off. So you only get one top stitch on the top side. So that chain stitch is going to provide additional stretch in this seam here. The flat knit also matches the piqué quite well in terms of dyeing it. So these are going to be done during different processes. The collars themselves are done on a flat knit machine, and these are all done basically in collar shapes. And usually you're going to have to do what's called DTM, so dye to match. And having things like this dye to match, and it's fairly close, is a really nice detail. I like the alternating design on the collar here. This is basically just more machine time on the flat knit machine. I like how they have the size on a different tag here as well. Okay, initial impressions, quite impressed. There's not a lot here that I can say is bad about this product. What I think has happened here is Psycho Bunny has gone to Peru and they've partnered with a manufacturing partner that knows exactly how to create really good polos, because the tiny details here, even dyeing the back of the buttons here to match the body fabric, it's something that you'd never think of unless you're designing polos all day. Even like the chain stitch here on the one side of the tape here is not something that you would know unless you are working with this kind of fabric, this kind of design day in and day out. So it's entirely possible that like a brand like Cycle Bunny may have hired somebody from Lacoste that was designing polos, and they know all of these little details. That, or they worked with a factory and they went to the factory and said, hey, we want to make a really good polo. What do you suggest? And they let the factory bring in their expertise to make suggestions and ultimately create a better product than a brand would on its own. And I think that's an important thing for a lot of brands to do, and other really experienced manufacturing partners, is as a brand, don't have your ego and that you know what's best. Lean into manufacturing partners that have gone through the kind of the trials and tribulations of product creation. And if they have suggestions that they can make to make your product better, and your goal is to make a better product, lean into that and let them make these suggestions, because again, like looking at this, initial impressions, there's not a lot you can improve on this polo. Anything else would be kind of like splitting hairs. Even the workmanship itself is very clean. Like the elastic lines up quite well, the seams line up quite well. They've chain stitched all of their seams so far. Whereas you could easily just, as a brand, just do a straight stitch. It would have no stretch, but it would still finish the garment, it would still close it. But having that attention detail to put a chain stitch on all of these seams, and unless you've been designing polos day in and day out, these are things you wouldn't know as a designer. Even the neck tape here, these are 3 different fabrics. These are 3 different processes, all cotton still at the end of the day, so they're still gonna be using the same types of dyes, but they are fairly close. And that's not that easy unless you have a very integrated supply chain where all of your components you can check and verify against each other. One thing you'll notice is if you go to any store and you look at the colors, like for example, black is not black. There is hundreds of shades of black. And if you go to any store and you start looking at all the different blacks, they're all gonna be very different, just because it's very hard to have a very tight, what's called delta E in terms of color accuracy. So to have the ability to match 1, 2, 3, all fairly close, this tells me that this is a very vertically integrated supply chain. This factory has been working with their suppliers for long enough time that they can ensure that these 3 are dyed to the exact same color. Even like the navies are very close. The navies probably match the bag very well. Passing the bag again. A little darker, but fairly close to the bag color. The embroidery, obviously there's the stabilizer on the back of the embroidery, but they've done a good job in terms of cleaning up all the excess. So taking a look at the back of the embroidery as well. So the white stuff here is gonna be what's called stabilizer. So it basically stiffens the fabric so that when you're doing embroidery, it doesn't move around too much. For a lot of brands, you basically have to rip off the stabilizer. I could see a lot of brands actually just leaving stabilizer in between the bunny ears, just because if you're ripping these things off quickly, that might not come out. But they've cleaned that up really well. Overall, like I'm very impressed with the quality of this. I think for like 120 bucks Canadian, that this is very well made for what type of product that this is. This is not going to be a kind of stamp for the entire brand because I haven't seen the other products that they've created. But whoever their polo supplier is definitely knows what they're doing. Even the alternating of the buttons, you do this because when you're up near the neck, if you have a vertical slit, it is actually quite hard to grab the collar and put in a button. So you do a horizontal slit, so you can grab it like this and feed the button in. Again, these are details that you might not necessarily know unless you're designing polos day in and day out. So overall, again, I think I'm quite impressed with the workmanship and the manufacturing side of this. Next, I'm actually going to take apart this. I'm going to show you all the trims and components and panel pieces you need to make a garment like this. But before I do, make sure you like, comment, subscribe so you can do a lot more of these teardowns. I think if you were to swap this out for Lacoste or you swap this out for Ralph Lauren, the product quality here can easily be sold at a much higher price point. So next up, let's take this apart. I'm gonna show you all the panel pieces you need to make a garment like this, all the trims and components, as well as give you my final thoughts and score on this product. Guys, even the thread they chose here is way stronger than it needs to be. They definitely partnered with a factory that knows exactly what they're doing here. I'm actually gonna cut open this detail here so you guys can see what I'm talking about for the construction of the seam. So you see here, this is the serge that they have. Then they stitched the tape onto the serge here, the overlock seam. And then they folded it over and then they did the chain stitch to attach it. So that is 3 different machines to make this one seam and 3 different stations. So, see that? Then they stitch this to that, then they fold it over, and then they stitch it with a chain stitch. Back panel. Then you'll see here on the placket, this is what's called interfacing. And this is bonded to the fabric to stiffen up parts, because when you have very soft and drapey fabric like this, if you don't stiffen it up with interfacing, you won't be able to get nice crisp sections like this. And just because I know you guys love it when we cut out the logos, let me get at the logo here. All right, so now that we've taken apart, here's all the trims and components that you need to make this garment. As you can see, we have our 2 sleeve panels here. We have our inner and outer placket with interfacing inside. We have our front panel. We have all of our flat knits for the collar and for the sleeves, as well as the back panel, the mother of pearl buttons, and the embroidery shirt. So before we look at the technical details and I give the score, let's talk about this overall product itself. I think that when I see something like this, what this tells me is they've obviously partnered with a manufacturing partner that knows exactly what they're doing. This is a very mature supply chain. So what do I mean by it's a very mature supply chain is that as a brand, whenever people are developing products, and a lot of brands do this, a lot of times they look for maybe the cheapest region or they default to specific regions. But by going with a region that clearly has been doing a lot of polos because they do a lot of the cost there, every part of that supply chain, from the flat knit suppliers, from the button suppliers, the embroidery suppliers, the fabric supplies, the dye houses, they've all been doing this type of product for so long that they've had the time and the maturity to develop their processes, to fine tune them, to become, masters of their craft. If Psycho Bunny were to partner with a different manufacturing partner, let's say in a cheaper region that does some polos but's not an expert in them, they would not have ended up with this good of a product. This product is a result, again, of whoever their manufacturing partner is that knows what they're doing. Out of all the products that I've reviewed on this show so far, I'd say that this is probably one that I'm most impressed with because of all the little attention to details that I know most brands won't know to actually look for. Stuff like the chain stitch on the shoulder, That's something that a really good factory would just put in, and I can guarantee you a lot of brands wouldn't even know it's there. But it just fits differently, it drapes differently, it's a little more comfortable, and they can't tell why, but it's that little je ne sais quoi of becoming a master of your craft is how you can develop a product like this ultimately. To manufacture this in Peru, I'm not 100% certain. I've manufactured in other South American regions, but I probably expect this to be probably around $11 to $12 to make. Again, the fabric is dyed to match fairly well. The yarns are quite strong. They're also DTM'd very well. For fabric, I'm gonna have to give this an 8 out of 10. They're using a 100% Pima cotton piqué, which is a great option for a polo like this. To elevate this a little bit more, they could have used a Sea Island cotton. However, I think at this price point, the option that they chose was a great option. For workmanship, I'm gonna have to give this a 9.5 out of 10. There is very little room for improvement here in terms of the workmanship. There's tiny little adjustments that could make this garment perfect, but again, I think that's nitpicking at the end of the day. I'm gonna give this 9 out of 10. Next up is attention to detail for design intent. The fact that they chose to use gross grain for the side split, the chain snitch for the neck tape, there's a lot of attention to detail here in terms of making sure all the colors match for all the different components. I'm gonna have to give them again, 9 out of 10 here for attention to detail. The final category here is going to be value. This is priced a little bit lower than Lacoste. It's around 120 Canadian, 100 USD. I think this is excellent workmanship. However, at that price point, I'm gonna have to give it a 7. That brings the total score to 33.5 out of 40. So we're gonna add this now to the scoreboard, and over the next few weeks, we're gonna add all of our back catalog of things we've already reviewed to the scoreboard as well. Let us know in the comments what other brands you want us to take a closer look at, and as a brand, let us know what things that you want to learn about product creation. I'm Joe, until next time.
If you guys want to see more behind the scenes secrets on the fashion industry and learn more about how to create products and brands, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and check out these videos.